Hello YouTube! It is time to make yet another video of my haul of games for the month of May 2014. So let's walk through all the items I picked up this month. I've got quite a few this month. It was a good month for game hunting. We'll start with the Nintendo GameCube, and first I have one of the key titles for the system, which is the Mega Man X Collection. If you remember, I picked this up for the PS2 a couple months ago. But that one was actually a sealed copy, so now I have an open copy of Mega Man X Collection to try out on the GameCube. Should be pretty cool. Next I have actually the first ever Pokemon game I've ever purchased in my life, which is Pokemon XD for GameCube as well. I don't know. I guess I'll play it. Next I have Virtua Quest, which is kind of a weird side story of the Virtua Fighter games by Sega. Sounds like a RPG with Virtua Fighter characters in a way, but this didn't really sell very well, so kind of neat to pick it up because I don't think they made a whole lot of these. Next we have another one of the GameCube games that's considered one of the rarer games on the system. Not really worth a whole lot yet, but I know this one's kind of difficult to find, and that is Spirits and Spells. I don't know, don't have a whole lot to say about this one. Next we have the second ever Pokemon game I've ever purchased in my life, and that is Pokemon Colosseum for the GameCube as well. I don't know, whatever. I'm not really into Pokemon, so that's why I've never bought any of these games before. But now I have two. Next is a Sega game for the GameCube, one of their earlier ports they put out on the system, which is Virtua Striker 2002. And finally, for GameCube, I have one of the multi-disc games for the system, which is Killer 7. Pretty cool art style on this one. I think this one's kind of picking up popularity lately, so I should give this a try, I think. Yeah, looks pretty cool. So next system, let's do, these are in really no order at all other than stacked by system. We'll do Sega Genesis, and I picked up complete copies of Spider-Man Separation Anxiety. Next is Tiny Toon Adventures Buster's Hidden Treasure. And believe it or not, this is one of the games put out by the developer Treasure. This is one of their earlier titles before they split off from Konami. So graphically, it looks pretty cool for the Genesis. And finally, for that system, I have a complete copy of Space Harrier 2. I don't know, I kind of like the Space Harrier games. This one should be pretty decent to try out. Next system we'll look at, and this will be a quick one because I only bought one game for the system this month, is the Sega Game Gear. But guess what? It's one of the key titles for the system, and that is Mega Man. Actually, I already had this, so guess what? This one's going on the auction block very soon, unless somebody else says they need it. But this is kind of a cool game. It's a mix of the levels from Mega Man 4 and Mega Man 5 on NES, but on your Game Gear. So one of the harder to find games on the Game Gear, and also one of the better games on the Game Gear. But I already had it, so it's going for sale. I'm going to stick with portables next, and the next system I have is the Game Boy, original Game Boy. I picked up a really cool game here. I've been playing this a lot this month. I think this one's highly underrated, and that is Trax. If you notice who this is by, it's by HAL Labs, which most people probably recognize as the developers of the Lolo games, Kirby games, and Super Smash Bros. But this one fell way under the radar, and it's super cool. Highly recommend picking up Trax for Game Boy. Next I have one of the more, probably later releases for the original Game Boy, and that is International Superstar Soccer. This next one is considered one of the rarer games on the system. I haven't had a chance to try it yet, but that is Sumo Fighter. Pretty unusual that this came out in the US, but whatever. It's a sumo fighting game for the Game Boy. And next we have one of the more obscure Mario games for the system, and that is Mario's Picross, which is a puzzle game with Mario. And finally, you don't find a whole lot of complete Game Boy games, especially black and white ones, very often, but I picked up a cheap complete copy of Hyanko Alien. Actually, I already had the cart, but for complete for $5, I couldn't turn this down. So, kind of neat to get one of the early releases on the system complete, really cheap. But yeah, definitely one of the more unusual titles for the system. Next, we'll look at Sega CD, and this will be a quick one because I just bought one game for the system, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man versus the Kingpin. So, probably one of the more popular games on Sega CD. I don't think this one's super rare or anything, but it's a really nice shape, so I could pick that up cheap. As I said, I am now getting into the Xbox 360. It's one of the systems I didn't have until recently. So I picked up a few more 360 games. Most of these are racing games. Sega Rally Revo by Sega is the first one. Next I have Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I've always loved the Marvel vs. Capcom games, but this is the one that I haven't actually played yet, so looking forward to this. I'm sure I'll put some time into this one. Next we have Project Gotham Racing 4, and I'm also a big fan of the Project Gotham Racing games, so this I'm looking forward to playing. And finally we have Import Tuner Challenge. So I'm sure this looks like some crappy US developed import tuning game, but it's actually a member of the Shutoko Battle series of Japanese games, where you race on Japanese highways and trick out your cars. These were released usually in the US as Tokyo Extreme Racer games, and they're actually really fun. So looking forward to getting this, because I think this is the most recent game in the series that we saw released in the US. So Import Tuner Challenge. Next system I have a couple games for, and I actually don't even own this system anymore because it's quite crap. But these are two of the rarer games on the system, and I got them cheap, and they are probably also going on the auction block very soon. So first of all, I have Pitfall for the 32X, one of the umpteen million ports of this game. And this actually goes for quite a bit of money. I think it's about a $100 card-only game. So yeah, I think this will be sold very soon. And next I have another one of the rare ports on the 32X, and that is Blackthorn. So if anyone's looking for this, please let me know quickly, because it's about to be for sale. Next system I have games for is the Sega Saturn, and I did pretty good this month. These are all complete. So starting off, I have Battle Stations. Nothing special here. This one I think is a little bit rarer than most people give it credit for, and that is Virtual Casino by Natsume. So kind of a interesting Japanese developed casino game. Next is Courier Crisis, and I think this is a little harder to get on the Saturn than it is on the PlayStation. Next one I have is Clockwork Knight 2, which is one of the first party Sega developed games that I think more people are kind of picking up interest in lately. Next we have a game in the Darkstalkers series. So I think this only came out on the Saturn. There was no PlayStation 1 version of this. And that is Night Warriors, Darkstalkers Revenge. So this is the second game in the Darkstalkers fighting series, which is pretty cool. Next we have a Sega first party fighting game, and that is Fighting Vipers. And then we have a Sega racing game, which is Manx TT, Super Bike. And finally, for the Saturn, we have Virtua Racing. So this is a pretty cheap game on the Saturn, but if you remember on the Genesis, this was one of the most expensive titles on the system when it came out. So I think it's a little more low-key on the Saturn, but it probably even looks better on the Saturn. Next system, which I kind of got a little more aggressive with this month, was the Dreamcast. So I picked up a lot of Dreamcast games this month. We'll start off with one of the key titles on the system that's pretty cool to get, is Tech Romancer. So one of the more obscure Capcom fighting games that's starting to be worth quite a bit of money. Next we have Armada. Then Toy Commander. A sealed copy of Sega Bass Fishing. It is the All-Stars version of the game, but it is sealed. Kind of cool. Sega Bass Fishing 2. We have Wacky Races. Believe it or not, the final ever Dreamcast US released game, which was NHL 2K2. Confidential Mission, which is one of the light gun games for the system. Time Stalkers. Zombie Revenge. This is a game I've always liked. I don't know why I never picked it up to buy it, but I remember renting it back in the day. I like this game a lot. Next we have Floygan Brothers, Episode 1. Guess what? They never made a sequel. Nobody liked this game. Wild Metal, which is a Rockstar released game. Not very popular, though. The multi-disc Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. I have the Dreamcast port of Resident Evil 2, which is one of the rarer games for the Dreamcast in Resident Evil series. House of the Dead 2. I'm really surprised I didn't own this, but Typing of the Dead, I played a lot of that as soon as it came out. So kind of played this game, but in typing form, not light gun form. Next we have Fur Fighters. And finally for the Dreamcast, Virtual Striker 2. Next system I got a couple games for is the Nintendo DS. And first of these is Miami Law. This I found out was the first game published by Victor Ireland after he left Working Designs. So it's actually a Hudson developed game, but kind of neat. Looking forward to trying that out. And finally for the DS, kind of an expensive game, this is worth quite a bit more money than I thought it'd be worth, is Super Robot Taisen OG Saga Endless Frontier. Now there's a title. But yeah, it's one of the Robot Taisen games that there's a big series of these in Japan, and this is one of the few that's come out in the US. So one of the more desirable games for the DS I picked up cheap. Next system I have a game for is the Atari 2600. And I've got quite a few 2600 games, but it's really unusual that I find them complete. But I got this one cheap, and I thought it's a cool package, and that is Firefighter by iMagic. Neat little slide tray game that has the manual and everything in there in the game. But yeah, cool package for that one. Next system I have some games for is the Super Nintendo. And unfortunately this month these are all cart only, but I got some decent stuff. First one of these is, I think, kind of a rarer game that most people don't really realize is that's so rare, is World Soccer 94, The Road to Glory, which is an Atlas released game. Next we have Power Pigs of the Dark Age, which is one of the late release Titus games. I actually have a box and manual for this somewhere that I've had for years, so this one will be complete. Next we have Super Widget, which is another Atlas game for Super Nintendo. And here we have one of the health-related games for the system, which is Packy and Marlin. There were 4 of these in the Reyes Systems published games. I actually have 3 of them now, so I just need to get a copy of Bronchi the Brontosaurus, and I'll have all of these. But yeah, these are pretty strange games. Next we have another crappy port of the crappy game Wayne's World. And then we have one of the more obscure baseball games for the system, and that is Hudson Soft's The Sporting News Baseball. And finally, I have a copy of Power Rangers Battle Racers, or Power Rangers Zero Battle Racers. This is one of the last released Power Rangers games for the system. Next system I have a couple games for is the Sega Master System. And I picked up a complete copy of Spellcaster, which actually looks to be a pretty cool game, judging by the pictures on the back. And finally, for the Master System, I picked up Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap, also complete. I think the Wonder Boy series is excellent. It's a very convoluted series with a lot of releases on a lot of systems. The numbering for the games is very weird, but this is one of the better ones in the series, so this is cool to pick up. Next system I have just one game for, and that is the Wii. And this is a compilation of Sega arcade light gun games. So this is Gunblade New York, Special Air Assault Force, and LA Machine Guns Rage of the Machines. Yeah, pretty cool to get a combo pack of these. So I don't think this is a super common one, but neat game for the Wii. Got 2 more systems with games this month, and that is the PS1 and PS2. So for PS1, first of all, I picked up Rhapsody, a musical adventure by Atlas. Kind of a unusual little RPG on the system. Next we have Street Fighter EX plus Alpha. So this was one of the first games in the series where it went 3D. And then I also have the sequel to that, which is Street Fighter EX 2 Plus. Got to make sure I get that extended title correct. But yeah, this is a little more uncommon, so this is the sequel to that game. Next we have Porsche Challenge, which was a first-party Sony released game. And pretty lame, because all you get to do is race the original Porsche Boxster, which really isn't that exciting at all. I don't even think the Boxster S was featured in this. Next we have Bomberman World, and I think this was the last Bomberman game for PS1 that I needed. Here we have a interesting spin-off of the Final Fantasy series that I think a lot of people have forgotten, and for good reason, and that is Chocobo Racing. Okay. Next one is disc only, but it's one of the rarer games on the system, and that is Batman Forever, the arcade game. I'm going to try to get a case for this pretty soon. Next we have another one of the pretty rare games for the system, I think kind of fell under people's radar, and that is The City of Lost Children. This is a pretty unusual one. I think it's French developed. Kind of explains a lot. Next we have one of the RPGs for the system, and that is the Grand Stream Saga. And then we get to Jackie Chan Stuntmaster. And believe it or not, several games about Jackie Chan have been released over the years. NES and TurboGrafx had two early ones before I think Americans even really knew who Jackie Chan was. But he was pretty popular by the time this one came out, so kind of a cool Jackie Chan game. Next is another RPG, and that is Guardians Crusade. And then we have, guess what? The final ever game released for the PS1 in the US. And it's another sports game, just like the Dreamcast was. This I don't think there's many of, but believe it or not, PS1 was around long enough to release a copy of FIFA 2005. So, yeah, that was pretty bizarre. This came out super late, but we do have a FIFA game that came out super late in the PS1 library, FIFA 2005. Next, I have a few big box games for PS1. First of these, this one's in really nice shape, is Viewpoint, which is one of the cool shooters on the system that I've been looking for. Next, I have Zero Divide, which itself is a really crappy game, but believe it or not, it has a hidden game inside of it, which is an enhanced version of Phalanx for the Super Nintendo. So one of the coolest shooters on the Super Nintendo has a semi-re-release on this system, is a hidden extra in this game. But this is kind of neat to pick up for that. Finally, we have PO'd, which is another big box game. And finally, last but not least, I have a few games for PS2 this month. So I picked up the last ever Working Designs game released, which is Growlancer Generations. Pretty cool package on this one, even though it's not the deluxe version. Next I have the final game in one of my other favorite series is Fatal Frame 3. I have part 1 and 2, but they're on the Xbox, and this one only came out on PS2, so it's kind of a mixed bag now that I have them on different systems, but whatever. Fatal Frame 3. Next I have a series that's kind of picking up popularity lately, and I picked up most of the games in this series, but not all of them this month. So I got Dot Hack Infection Part 1. I got Dot Hack Part 2, Mutation. I didn't get Part 3, but I got the rarest game of these four, which is Dot Hack Part 4 Quarantine, and this one goes for pretty decent money. So yeah, neat to get that one. Next I have a unusual survival horror game, which is Echo Night Beyond by H-Tech. I picked up Guilty Gear Isuka. And this is a GameCube game that I don't know how it ended up in my PS2 stack, but that is product number 3 for GameCube. Then back to PS2, I picked up another one of the rare games on the system, and that is Yakuza 2. Kind of a neat Sega series. I have Yakuza 1. People say it's like Shenmue. I don't know. I love Shenmue, but I didn't really get into the first one as much. So I'll give this one a shot because I'm curious how this one's going to be. Next I have one of the Treasure developed games for PS2, and that is Stretch Panic. Featured on the cover of the ill-fated Game Go magazine, actually issue number 1. As bad as this game flopped, it's kind of unusual why that magazine chose to put it on issue number 1, but whatever. Next I have a weird Capcom developed game, and that is Under the Skin. Don't really know what this one's all about, but it seems really funky from the artwork and the description on the back of the cover. And finally for PS2 I have one of the launch games, and that is Ridge Racer 5. I don't have it in my pile here, but the other thing I picked up this month that was notable is a couple of the Dreamcast VGA adapters. One of them is by Interact, and one of them is by a company called, I think, Madness or something like that. I got those for only $2 a piece, and I probably won't keep those. I'll probably sell those too, but Dreamcast VGA adapters are pretty hot, so that was a good pickup as well. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this video of all the stuff I bought over the month of May 2014. If you enjoyed this video, please comment, like, subscribe to my feed. I'd love to hear from you. And I will see you next month in the month of June 2014 with hopefully a whole bunch more pickups. So glad you enjoyed my video, hopefully, and have a great night. Thanks, YouTube.